Hi everybody, it's Daniel with Funukuleleprojects, and I have a really fun project to share with you tonight. It's a very special little instrument, and so I want to introduce you to Josephine. This is Josephine. Isn't she gorgeous? She belongs to Jennifer, a subscriber, and I've done work for Jennifer in the past, and one of the things she had mentioned to me, actually in a comment section when I did Jason and Patrice's, she mentioned that she has an old Kamaka of a similar era, but had intonation, so she didn't play it that much. And from what she described, I thought, that would be a great example. If all the things are wrong with it I thought could possibly be wrong with it, to be able to do a video about what are all the things that can go wrong or can be wrong with vintage instruments that need to be looked at. So I actually contacted Jennifer. One of the reasons I contacted her, and she doesn't even know this, she'll know this as she sees the video, but she paid me rather generously for the other repair. And I'm someone that really appreciates kindnesses like that, and I told her, listen, this could really help everybody, and I would like to do a video. If you'd be willing to send Josephine to me, I'd like to do a video about her. And the way I looked at it is I felt like she already paid for taking care of it just from her kindness. And so she agreed. At first she was concerned that it would be a lot more work than I expected, and I said, I have a good idea of what's probably wrong, so go ahead and send her out. Josephine showed up, and everything that Jennifer said was indeed a problem with the intonation, and then there are other problems. First off, with a lot of these vintage instruments, Kamaka, like this Kamaka, like the Anahu I fixed in the past, that have bar frets, oftentimes the frets were set pretty high, and the problem with that is that if you're just touching lightly on the fret, which theoretically everyone should be doing, then it plays in tune. But if you put any tiny bit too much pressure, then the notes will go sharp. Now in reality, most people push too hard. And so on an instrument like this, when the frets were too tall, they would go sharp when you push too hard. In addition to that, these old sopranos have pretty short scales. A lot of them are like just over 12 inches. And because of that, when you put more modern strings on it that are stiffer, the C will oftentimes have real issues with intonation because it's so stiff. It won't sound very good as you go up the fretboard, and that was a problem with this one. The E was not quite as bad, but the C had issues. In addition to that, a lot of these old Kamakas that weren't of the collector variety, like Jason and Patrice's was, with the hand-cut rope binding and everything, this was more of the tourist model. I don't know if the video will show it, but the neck is ever so slightly cockeyed. It goes like a little bit to the side, and that's not a problem if the bridge is set in proper relation to everything else, to the frets in the neck. And so I said that wouldn't be a problem, but I anticipated there'd probably be some issues with the bridge, and it turned out there were. The bridge was a little bit loose, which is interesting because Jennifer had this repaired in the past, and the repair created some other issues that were sort of problematic, not necessarily for intonation, but just some things that shouldn't have been done. One of the biggest things was that whoever repaired it had sprayed matte finish over the surface of the top of the soundboard without asking Jennifer. As far as I'm concerned, a vintage instrument, you don't touch the finish without asking the owner of the instrument. And whenever possible, you don't touch it at all. But in a case like something like this, something needed to be addressed. And it became really an issue when I put safe release tape, and I said safe release tape across both sides, either side of the fret to work on the frets, and the safe release tape lifted some of that matte finish off because whoever sprayed it never prepped the soundboard in the first place, and it was probably just like a can of cheap matte finish, and then it was sprayed on an instrument that had probably been waxed in the past, and needless to say, the finish didn't stick. So I told Jennifer she had two options. Because of the fact this instrument has been brushed to refurbish the finish at some point in time, I could brush the top to match that, or I could clean off everything that's there down to the original finish and lightly spray the top. And if I did that, then I could also, whoever brushed it brushed around these marks, around the decal. So I could sand the brush marks down and very lightly coat it to protect the decal, and then clean everything else and rub it down, but I would only spray the top, and that way I could match to the sides and the back so that it would all match. And I ended up doing that, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Because the way I fixed all these things, first off, I had to take the bridge off because it was loose. In taking the bridge off, I looked inside like I do everything else, and you're never going to believe this, but there were two big chunks of paper towel inside Josephine. One was right about here, and one was, actually it was glued underneath the bridge plate, and it was hanging down behind the bridge. And I decided they just had to go. And so I made a special tool. I'll show a photo, so you can see a photo of the pieces of paper towel that were stuck inside Josephine. And also show a photo of the tool that I modified. It was a tool that I made for putting the transducer, the piezo transducers into the pink Vorsen I modified for Jody from Grow Meets Uke. That tool I taped a razor blade to so I could scrape across the bridge plate and scrape across the soundboard to get the paper towel to come off. And that worked. It took about an hour to get it off, but I was able to get it off. And so then all that's left is a tiny piece of paper towel that's actually glued to the top, and the remnant that was actually glued underneath the bridge plate that the other person had put in. Fixing the top, I had to level the frets. I lowered the frets, and I leveled the frets, and then I profiled the frets so that they don't affect intonation when you touch them. In addition to that, they're comfortable. Your fingers don't feel like they're getting cut as they slide over them. I cleaned up the sides also. There was a really uncomfortable spot on the neck right here that I smoothed out and I rubbed down. The other thing that didn't affect intonation at all that Jennifer had asked for was some fret markers. And it's in a permanent collection, and it's her instrument, and she wanted fret markers on it, even though not original. And so we decided to go with maple because this was one of the tourist models, and I've seen old instruments with maple fret markers, so I put maple fret markers in it. Now the tilted neck was a bit of a challenge. Since the neck was tilted, and the strings are not exactly in line with the neck. The strings are in line with the nut and the frets and the bridge. I had to be sure that the fret markers sort of balanced out in between the tilted neck and the strings that are going in line with everything else. So rather than put the fret markers on and then do the finish, I had to do all the finish. I had to remount the bridge, and then I had to line up the strings so that I could get the center of the fret markers, the center of the strings. I'll have a photo of the tape that I put down, and then how I put the strings in place. The strings in place so I could put the tape down over the frets so I could line everything up so that I could put the fret markers to where they balanced out, where they're more in line with the strings, but they also are close enough to in line with everything else, so it sort of blends everything together. One other issue that had a very, very small effect on intonation, not a big one, but the bridge wasn't perfectly parallel to the nut and to the frets. It was sort of in line with the body as a whole. But once again, if the neck is slightly tilted and the frets are in line with that, then the frets are slightly tilted. That means that the bridge has to line up. So it's very careful. That's why I line everything up whenever I do an instrument, to make sure it's lined up. And then once it's lined up, centered, I make sure that everything is parallel to the nut and the frets and the bridge. So now, Josephine, the intonation is really good when I check. Now, these are new strings. I don't like, trying to retune. It takes time, and but I try to get through Sweet Hour Prayer. Let me see if it's close enough. C dropped. Now I'm using the unituner, and as I mentioned in my tuning video, with these friction tuners, and these were put on. These are not the original tuners. Jennifer had these put on. They're actually pretty nice. Someone's coming downstairs. You might start hearing people walking through there. So anyway, I got it in tune. I'll play Sweet Hour Prayer, and we'll see if I make it through Sweet Hour Prayer. Being upside down, you never can tell. That was not the best I made it through Sweet Hour Prayer. She is so slick, having been polished up. You can see her sliding around as I'm holding her. Anyway, I can't do her justice because, I'm playing her upside down. She's a wonderful little instrument. It was such a joy to work on her. I know that she's going back to a home where she will be greatly appreciated. As I said before, I really, really enjoy working on these really old instruments, these vintage instruments, and giving life back to them. I know it sounds hokey, you've heard me say it before, but I really mean it when I say, when I look at an instrument like this, I feel like it had life as a tree, and then it had life as an instrument, and then, a lot of times they get discarded, and what I get to do is give them their life as an instrument back. And in this one in particular, I know Josephine has an owner that really appreciates her, and the only reason she didn't get played more was because of the intonation issues and because it wasn't comfortable to play. She wasn't comfortable to play. But now, she's a dream to play, especially if you're right-handed. And the intonation is taken care of. The paper towels have been removed. She looks like a vintage instrument that has been cared for years, and I know that she's going to be cared for years to come. Anyway, thank you, Jennifer, for letting me work on Josephine. Thank you, everybody, for watching this video, and stay safe, stay healthy. I'll see you in the next video.